to Esalen Live, where we chat with change agents and swim deep waters in an ongoing exploration of human potential. I'm your host, Christine Chen. Your personality type could be the key to social change. On Esalen Live today, I'm super excited about this chat. Dr. Deborah Egerton, or Dr. E, as she's called. She is here to share her expertise on the Enneagram approach to inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. This is the heart of her work, IDEA. She's a specialist in it. Dr. Egerton joins us on Esalen Live right now. Hello.
Hello there. So good to be here.
So good to see you. Thank you for making the time. I know you're incredibly busy and you have so much work ahead of you to guide us to do the work as well. Let's start with talking about the Enneagram, because this is sort of the mindset that we're going to take in this particular conversation today about knowing ourselves so we can create these sort of tentacles for change. What exactly is an Enneagram for those of us who are less aware of what they are?
All right. So the Enneagram is actually a psycho-spiritual tool that we use, and it identifies 9 different personality archetypes. Enneagram comes from the Greek words, and it means 9, Ennea, and gram, the map. So it absolutely sort of is a map or a blueprint of our souls, I always say, and shows us different ways that we show up. It's like picking up a mirror. And I like the analogy that when you pick up a mirror or you stand in front of a mirror in the morning, you may see yourself on the front side and think everything is fine. But if you haven't held that mirror up and checked out what's going on behind you, you can, of course, be having a very different experience in the back. You know, your hair may be sticking all up and your blouse is not tucked into your pants, or anything can be happening. But the Enneagram allows you to really surface things about yourself that you were asleep to or unaware of.
If you're just joining us on Esalen Live, we're with Dr. E, Dr. Deborah Egerton, and she's here sharing her expertise on the Enneagram approach to inclusion, diversity, equity, and anti-racism. So if you're joining us at home, can you see these types, and let us know what you think you are? Because this may inform how you listen to this conversation, and we can get more out of it that way. So do we know, when we know these types, that we can make changes in our lives? And what's the value of knowing these types for our inner work, in other words?
Well, when we find, and I tend to use the word point, a lot of people get hung up on the type and they have a reaction to that. There's a resistance to being a type. The feeling is, you're putting me in a box. I'm more than a type. And you are so much more than a type. The Enneagram actually has 9 different points, and we have all of those points inside of us. However, one of them leads, one of them is dominant, one of them is the place that we start from. And most Enneagram practitioners and teachers, from everything that we've studied, we believe that our type actually comes in with us, that we're born with a predisposition for this type. And I will tell you that if you have children or siblings, you can understand that you can have many people, many children in one family raised by the same people with very different personalities.
Oh, for sure. Dr.
Yeah,
E, we
so
have
that's
some numbers coming in. So I think I'm pronouncing your name correctly. Pega sits at 8. And
yes.
Catherine says that she's at 1 with a 9 wing. And then someone else says, your name, Lissy, you have a 2 energy. And Robert says, I'm feeling 9. What does this mean? Yeah, I mean, you can take any one of those and chat about it a little bit.
All right. Well, what I'd like to say, so that I can help everyone, we we have three centers of intelligence: our head, our heart, and our gut. There are three types in each of those centers. So we had someone from 8 and a 9, and the 8 and the 9 would be in what we call the body center, the gut center, the belly center. So people who sit there, the 8 is usually very self-confident, very independent. I can tell you 8s are very willful and can be confrontational. And the energy at 8 is very strong and it moves out towards you. So the name challenger is quite appropriate. Now, people who sit at point 9 are right next to 8. And so they, there's some different terminology around wings. We're not going to get into all of that. But the 9s are peacemakers because even though they're in the body center and they can feel the energy of what's going on around them, what happens at point 9 is there's this desire for peace. And so 9s make brilliant mediators, but they can be very conflict avoidant. They do not like conflict. And they can be reassuring, but they can also be complacent. They can be very approachable and then sometimes resigned.
Right.
So with the 9, you have some different things going on, as you do with all of the types.
And so when you know these things about yourself, how does this support doing the inner work so that you can do the work outside yourself in society?
The way that it supports doing the work out into society is so very often what we are doing is we are taking in information, simply taking in information, and people confuse taking in information for doing inner work. Inner work is when you go deep and you allow yourself to experience what's coming up for you. You actually go into a place where you begin to observe your own behaviors. You begin to observe how you're showing up in the world. And with that, after a while, if the way that you're showing up isn't very positive, it actually becomes a little bit, awkward. It's uncomfortable for you to continue with these patterns of behavior that you learn to recognize. It helps us in our outer world because it helps us to move from me and mine to us and ours. And so doing the inner work helps us to actually be able to discern that we are all connected and to stop sort of pointing fingers and blaming other people for what may be our own action and behaviors. So it's very powerful.
So you do a lot of work with many groups, and there are some exercises that you do lead when you are in person, which we'll talk about in just a second. And we don't have time in this format to do the whole thing. But what I'd like to do is invite you, if you're watching here on Esalen Live, to participate with us. This is sort of the beginning of an exercise that Dr. E shares with participants in workshop about how we understand that we enter the room. And again, this is just the beginning. So I'll let Dr. E explain.
All right. If you recognize that at any point in time when you go somewhere and you enter a room, you bring your energy with you. And the importance of recognizing that you bring your energy with you and how you show up to different people helps you to be mindful of observing your own behaviors. But there are some things that come with you that are totally unintentional and that you have not paid attention to perhaps in the past. So I would just say, I would like for you, if you're listening live, to just take a moment and get comfortable and grounded in your seat. If possible, make sure that you are in a position that allows your posture to be as erect as you possibly can, to line yourself up. All people that are able-bodied, get as comfortable as you can in an erect position. And those of you who may not be able-bodied, just make yourself comfortable in whatever way possible. What I would ask you to do is just to close your eyes or just lower your eyes and soften your gaze, and just think about entering a room. And when you enter the room, what comes with you? What is the energy that you're bringing? As I think about entering the room, I recognize that today I'm bringing the energy of love. That's important to me. Just find an energy that you feel that you're bringing in the room with you at this moment. I also can recognize that I bring my ancestry with me. As an African American woman, I'm bringing my gender with me as well. And I'm recognizing what goes along with bringing in my gender and my ethnicity. What's coming up for you? I also recognize that I bring my fears and my anxiety just around being in the world today with all the things that are going on. And I can speak to them and say, be still. Love is leading today. With that, I'd ask you to just come back into the room. Take a deep breath in and out, and open your eyes. Now, that is a much, much deeper exploration than what we did just now, but it's very helpful.
It is already very helpful. But again, to repeat this, this is just the beginning of that particular exercise with Dr. Deborah Egerton. We're talking about Enneagram and the approach to changing within, changing society from what we know within. I found that so interesting because the word that came up for a lot, Lisi says anxious and anxious energy. Robert has said peace, love, and understanding. And what I find here is the word that comes up for me when you were guiding that was the word threshold, right? It's there's a crossover. Remember, eat, pray, love, like attraversiamo, right? You're crossing over. So that moment where you enter a room is like a moment of awareness where you can say, like, what am I bringing? Is that what we're trying to get from this exercise? And then how can that help us?
Well, absolutely. It is really important to be aware of what you're bringing because so very often what people end up being the recipient of is not at all what you intended for people to be the recipient of. And so if you go from one meeting to another meeting, which is happening a lot to us right now on Zoom, you're sometimes bringing the energy of whatever the interaction was in the meeting beforehand. And if you don't take time to stop and think about, okay, let's reset, which you can do by getting grounded and centered, but also just do a little scan for what am I bringing into this meeting with me at this moment in time. And when you have the time to go into meditation, that's when you really want to pay attention to what are all the layers under the layers of what you are truly bringing everywhere you go. What stays with you all the time? What stays with you that you've been unaware of? When I talk about the three centers, body types in the body center, 8, 9, and 1, bring an energy of sort of anger, and that anger can translate out and manifest in many different ways. And then in our heart center, we have the 2s, the 3s, and the 4s. 2s, 3s, and 4s can bring an energy of sort of guilt that shows up in different forms of shame for the 3 different types there. And then in the head center, the 7, 8, and the 5, 6, and 7, they actually can bring an energy of fear and anxiety. and it can manifest in very many different ways. And all of these things that we're bringing have an impact on our interactions, particularly across differences. And
Mm.
that's one of the things that we explore. How can we pay attention to this?
There's so much in conversation that we could go into in terms of the practice of presence, right? The practice of being present, which other experiences almost are very similar to what you just described. And then we have a question as to what are the layers under the layers, Pega wants to know. And do we have time to discuss that a little bit?
Well, the layers, just a very little bit, the layers under the layers have so much to do with our lived experience. And it's not every day that we walk around thinking about what our lived experience is, and that our lived experiences are different. We don't all come from the same background. We haven't all had the same experience. We haven't all had the same opportunities. And from the time that we are born, we learn that differences can be scary. And so that's why the Enneagram is so powerful in the IDEA space, because right there with the Enneagram, we begin to understand that inclusion and diversity, equity, anti racism are actually things that you have to cultivate. It's not like it's intuitive and it's just there naturally, because we have received so many messages and from very well intended people. But these messages over time around who is safe and who is not safe, who's going to harm us and who's going to help us, who comes from a background that's appropriate for you to spend time with, and who comes from a background where it's not appropriate for you to spend time, or what neighborhood. All these things are the
Mm.
layers under the layers.
And when there's conflict between the types, what do we do with that?
When there's conflict between the types, what we do is we recognize that we're all spiritual beings in human bodies trying to do the best we can on any given day. So, what's powerful about the Enneagram and understanding yourself is that you begin to understand what your triggers are, and you begin to understand what you brought to that conflict. And if you study the Enneagram and you study all 9 points, and you happen to be maybe in conflict with someone who has a different Enneagram type than you do, then you can actually surface and get in touch with empathy and compassion, first for yourself in that moment, recognizing that you're feeling uncomfortable, and then also recognizing this person is uncomfortable too, but also maybe for some very different reasons. And it doesn't need to be judged. It
Mm.
doesn't need, you don't need to demonize, judge, or even go to a place of just dislike or disdain. It's a moment in time where we really need to access our empathy, our compassion, and our humanity.
Recognizing that people are who they are is so much a part of it. Within the Enneagram itself and the 9 types, there is a diversity in itself, right? So then, how do we apply this theory to embrace diversity authentically? There's a lot going on right now, and you and I, as women of color, can have a whole different conversation than we're having right now. And the layers upon layers of the conversation about diversity is a massive journey in itself. But how can we do this authentically? I think that's the word, because we don't want to tokenize, we don't want to bypass, we definitely want to try to learn this and show up authentically. So it's a hard
Right.
topic to discuss briefly, but could you give us some guidance?
I can. That's the exact reason, Christine, that I created the course, the IDEA course, primarily because it is a difficult topic to discuss. It's difficult to understand. But if we recognize it from the moment that we were born, that we did learn that differences are scary. And unfortunately, even as children, we begin to absorb all of these different messages around us. And the most important work that we will ever do will be the journey to the heart of humanity. And in order to get there, we have to touch our own souls. So it is only going to show up in the outer world. The good work that we're trying to do is only showing up, I would say, parallel to the level of our souls that we're willing to touch and to look at our own woundedness. I always say that hurt people hurt people. And we are all wounded in some way, shape, or form. And we have to touch those wounds and we have to heal those wounds. We have to look at people who have been pushed out into the margins and are marginalized. And how do we learn to develop the empathy and the compassion to not be so self centered that we do not recognize that we're all connected and we need to be pulling everybody back in from the margins. We
Mm,
need to heal ourselves in order to do that.
yeah. I always like to say it's not either or, it's a we thing.
So we think it's
It-
both. I say it's both and.
yes. Well, this workshop that you are co-leading with Russ Hudson is a brand new one for Esalen. Can you give us a little idea of what exactly will happen in this workshop to do this type of work and why it's so important?
Well, I want people to be prepared to do inner work. So many people do believe that this work of social justice and racial healing, like I said earlier, they're taking it into their headspace. But this work is about making a shift in the heart space. Because when you recognize that um, everyone is connected to you, and what happens to you is happening to me. It's not just happening to me, it's happening to all of us. And one of the things that I tell people is that racism and othering will come to your door. It will come to your door in some way, shape, or form. Therefore, it's really important to do your own work so that you will be ready in the heart space to recognize it when it comes and be willing, ready, and able to stand in the position of being an ally and an advocate. And to be an ally or an advocate against racism and othering in all of its ugly forms, you have to have some core strength. You have to have the core strength to say, no, not on my watch. And
Hmm.
so this particular workshop is about helping people to get to that place.
Yeah, and owning our own ability to take action and understand the actions that we're taking. This workshop, the Enneagram, Social Justice, and Racial Healing with Dr. E and Russ Hudson, go check it out. It's all over our website. Thank you so much for explaining a very complicated topics, in such a beautiful and heartfelt way, Dr. E.
Thank you, Christine. I'm just delighted to be able to do this today.
Yeah. Send Dr. E a little bit of love. She said so many powerful things. So much to think about, so much to consider. Take the time today, be present, and think about how you enter a room, that threshold. Thanks for joining us, Lynn Live. We'll see you very soon. Have a great day, everyone.